The hollow river was restless that night, its surface alive with flickering lights that bobbed erratically, like a constellation distorted by trembling hands. Elias stood at the water's edge, his gaze fixed on the lanterns, those spectral beacons that held the souls of the drowned. Each flicker, each sudden disappearance, felt like a sinister pulse beating beneath the water's dark skin. Ada stood beside him, her dark eyes reflecting the chaotic glow with a mix of fear and determination. "They're more agitated tonight," she whispered, voice barely carrying above the susurrus of the restless river. Elias nodded, his weathered face tight with tension. "The curse is waking," he murmured, "and it's hungry." Behind them, the faint light from their small home barely pushed back the encroaching night. Mara's frail form was visible through the window, her pale hands clutching a candle as she muttered prayers into the darkening room. The family's burden weighed heavier than ever on her, the years of loss and fear etched into the lines of her delicate face. In the village, whispers had grown into murmurs, and murmurs into rumors. Folks gathered in small clusters near the square, casting uneasy glances toward the glowing river. Old Tom, bent and weather-beaten, shuffled among them, sharing his own grim warnings with a voice hoarse from years of cautioning. Elias had heard the talk, but kept his distance, knowing that words alone would not quell what was rising. Yet, he knew the time was near when action must be taken, when the ritual would demand more than the usual offerings. Ada's fingers tightened around the worn leather cover of the journal she had found her, vessel of secrets and sorrow that had fueled her growing understanding of the curse's depth. "We can't let this continue," she said softly, meeting Elias's gaze. "There has to be a way to end it." He looked at his daughter, seeing the fierce hope burning within her despite the shadows gathering around them. "We'll face it together," he promised, voice steady but low, "whatever it takes." As the night deepened, the river's surface grew turbulent. The lanterns flickered violently, some sputtering out only to reignite moments later, their ghostly light casting long, wavering shadows on the water and the faces of those who dared watch. The drowned were restless, their demand rising. A sudden chill swept over the riverbank, carrying with it whispers faint, spectral voices that seemed to crawl through the dark and curl around the bones of the living. Ada shivered but stood firm, her hand finding Elias's. The bond between them was a fragile shield against the encroaching dread. Inside the house, Mara's whispered prayers faltered as a cold wind rattled the window panes. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, the weight of the curse threatening to crush what little strength remained. Outside, the village held its breath. The rising tide of the drowned spirits was no longer a distant threat, but an immediate peril drawing nearer with each flickering light lost to the river's depths. Elias and Ada prepared their small boat, securing lanterns and gathering talismans old Tom had entrusted them with. The air was thick with salt and sorrow, the scent of wet earth and ancient water mixing with the faint metallic temps of fear. "This is the night," Elias said, voice low and resolute. "We carry the past on our shoulders, but tonight we fight for the future." Ada nodded, feeling the river's cold breath on her skin as she stepped into the boat beside her father. The lanterns bobbed wildly around them, the cursed light flickering like frantic heartbeats. The river seemed alive, watching, waiting, and as they pushed off into the dark waters, the line between the living and the drowned grew thinner fragile thread stretched taut by the rising tide. Their journey into the haunted depths had begun, and with it, the family's desperate fight against a curse older than memory. The lanterns of the hollow river would not be returned easily, and the price of failure was unthinkable. But Elias and Ada were ready to face the darkness, their bond a beacon of fragile hope against the creeping shadows. The river whispered its ancient secrets, and the night held its breath. The rising tide was upon them. Ada stepped lightly across the creaking wooden floor of old Thom's cottage, the heavy scent of damp earth and burning wood wrapping around her like a shroud. The low light from the hearth cast flickering shadows that danced across the walls, revealing shelves cluttered with ancient tomes, dried herbs, and trinkets collected from the river's edge over decades. Old Tom himself sat hunched in a worn armchair, his thick beard flecked with grey eyes, sharp despite the weight of years. "You wanted to know about the flood," he said, his voice rough as gravel yet steady. "It changed everything. The river wasn't always cursed, not until that night." He gestured toward a faded map pinned above the hearth, its edges curled and brittle. "This here is the hollow river as it was before the floodwaters came rushing down from the mountains." Ada moved closer, tracing the delicate lines with her finger. "What happened?" Tom sighed, a sound heavy with memory. "Long ago, before your family was bound by this curse, the river swelled beyond its banks. The village was caught unprepared, houses washed away, lives lost in a single terrible night. They say the river was angry more than just nature's fury. Something unnatural stirred beneath the waters." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in her chest. "And the lanterns. They say that drowned souls linger, tethered by the lanterns that once guided them home but now hold them captive," Tom explained. "Your ancestors tried to appease them, offering lanterns each year to keep the spirits at bay. But that flood, that night, marked the beginning of the curse." Ada's eyes dropped to the map again, her fingers trembling slightly. Was there any way to stop it, to end this? Old Tom's gaze softened, a rare flicker of hope piercing the gloom. "There might be. The old law speaks of a sacrifice, not just of gifts, but of blood and will. A reckoning at the river's edge." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest sound of water lapping against the shore. Ada felt the chill settle deep in her bones. She looked up, catching the faint glow of lanterns bobbing on the river, their light flickering as if in response to the stories unfolding within the cottage walls. "We have to try," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For Mara, for Father, for all of us." Old Tom nodded grimly. "The path won't be easy, Ada, but knowing the past is the first step toward reclaiming the future." As the fire crackled low and the night deepened outside, Ada felt the fragile thread of hope tighten around her heart. Even as the shadows lengthened and the river's cursed light continued to flicker with restless intent, the past was no longer a distant memory, was a summons, pulling her into the depths of a legacy she could no longer ignore. She reached for the journal she had found days ago, its pages now heavy with new understanding. The river's secrets were unraveling, and with them, the fate of her family and the hollow river itself. The candlelight flickered weakly in the small, cramped room where Mara lay, her breath shallow and uneven. Elias sat beside her, his large, calloused hands trembling as they gently clasped her frail fingers. The years of hardship were etched deep into his weathered face, the lines of worry, guilt, and exhaustion carved by the relentless burden of the curse that haunted their family. Outside, the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, carrying with it the faint, mournful murmur of the hollow river. It was a sound both familiar and dreadful, a reminder that the boundary between their world and the drowned souls was growing thinner by the hour. Mara's pale face was almost translucent in the dim candlelight, her soft features slack with illness. She had always been the gentle heart of the family, patient and loving even as the years wore down her strength. Now, Sickness gripped her like a shadow, sapping the light from her eyes. Her whispered prayers filled the room, barely audible but persistent, as if clinging to some fragile hope. Elias glanced toward the window, where the river's cursed glow seeped through the curtains like a living thing. He felt the weight of the unseen eyes watching them, the drowned, restless and hungry, pressing closer to reclaim what was theirs. The disappearance of the lanterns had already begun to unravel their fragile peace, and now the manifestations grew stronger, more tangible. Just the night before, a pale, waterlogged figure had been glimpsed near the edge of the riverbank, its glowing eyes piercing the darkness. Ada stood at the river's edge that evening, the spectral lanterns bobbing like restless stars on the water's surface. The mist curled and twisted around her slender legs, cool and damp against her skin. The lantern's eerie light reflected in her dark eyes, mirroring the depths of the river itself. She felt the pull of the water, a cold embrace that seemed to reach out for her. Suddenly, the surface broke, silently, as a figure emerged, pale and dripping, its eyes glowing with a mournful intensity. Ada froze, heart pounding, caught between fascination and terror. The drowned had crossed the threshold, their presence undeniable and close. Back in the house, Elias moved with quiet purpose. He knelt near the hearth, placing a lantern carefully on the stone floor. His voice was low, murmuring prayers passed down through generations, words meant to hold back the darkness, to keep the spirits at bay. But the air was thick with anticipation, charged and heavy. Shadows flickered unnaturally at the edges of the room, twisting and writhing like living things. Elias's gaze darted nervously toward the corners where the waterlogged shapes seemed to gather, waiting. The tension within the family mounted. Ada confronted Elias in the kitchen one evening, her voice trembling but resolute. "We can't just wait for this to end, Father. The curse is tightening its grip. If we don't act, it will take more than just lanterns next time." Elias's jaw clenched. "I know," he admitted, eyes dark with fear and guilt. "But every step we take feels like walking deeper into the river's cold embrace." Mara's frailty weighed on them both, a living testament to the curse's toll. Outside, a faint splash echoed from the river, followed by the brief flicker of a lost lantern's glow beyond the window. The sound sent a shiver through the room, a stark reminder that the drowned were no longer content to remain distant shadows. As the night deepened, the family's desperation grew. Elias vowed silently to confront the curse head-on, unwilling to lose Mara or Ada to the depths. Ada, fueled by a fierce determination born of grief and hope, prepared to delve deeper into the secrets that bound them all. But the river was unforgiving, and the drowned more relentless than ever. Outside, the cursed light of the hollow river flickered ominously, as if echoing the mounting dread that consumed the family. The line between life and death blurred, and with each passing moment, the curse tightened its grip, drawing them inexorably toward a fate as cold and dark as the river itself. The family's fight had only just begun, and the night whispered of sacrifices yet to come. Elias stared out into the darkness, the weight of ancestral guilt heavy on his shoulders. "We will end this," he vowed, "or we will all be claimed by the river's cold embrace." But the river's secrets were ancient and cruel, and the drowned were patient. The glow outside dimmed, flickered, and then steadied, as if watching and waiting for the next move. And in the shadows, the drowned waited too, their eyes glowing with a terrible hunger that no ritual could set. The curse was tightening, and the family had nowhere left to run. The night held its breath, and the river whispered its dark promise once more. The evening settled over the hollow river like a thick, suffocating shroud, the sky a muted canvas of greys and deepening blues. Inside their small, weathered home, perched precariously on the riverbank, Elias moved with a solemnity born of years spent bound to the river's ancient curse. His hands, rough and steady, carefully arranged the lanterns on the worn wooden table. Each lantern held a flickering flame enclosed in fragile glass lanterns that carried the souls of the drowned. Souls Elias and his family were sworn to return annually to the river's cold embrace. Ada watched from the shadowed corner, her dark eyes reflecting the lantern light as it danced across the peeling walls. The ritual had always been a somber affair, but this year the air felt heavier, the silence pressing in with a weight that made her skin crawl. Mara sat nearby, her pale hands busy lighting a candle, her eyes distant and haunted. The flickering flames cast long, trembling shadows that seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally in the low light. Elias's voice broke the silence. "We must be ready before night falls. The river waits, and the souls cannot linger longer than they must." Ada nodded, but her heart pounded with a restless unease. Strange things had been happening, lanterns disappearing, whispers echoing near the water's edge, and an icy chill that no fire could chase away. She felt drawn to the river in a way she couldn't explain, as if the water itself was calling her. As the family prepared to leave, Elias took the first lantern, the glass gleaming faintly in the fading light. One by one, they gathered their burdens, stepping into the damp night air that smelled of moss and decay. The river's surface shimmered with the soft glow of countless lanterns bobbing like restless stars. But then a sudden, shattering silence. A coldness swept through the air, sharper than the autumn wind that rustled through the skeletal trees. Ada's breath caught as she glanced back toward the table inside. There, where the last lantern had rested moments before, only an empty space remained. "Father," Ada whispered, voice trembling. "One's gone." Elias's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing with a mixture of fear and anger. "Impossible," he muttered, but even as he spoke, the truth settled like a stone in his gut. The first loss, the curse was tightening its grip. Back inside, Mara clutched her candle, her knuckles white with tension. The absence of that lantern was not just a missing light. It was a silent scream, a warning that the drowned were no longer content to wait. Ada's resolve solidified in that moment. No longer a passive observer, she would fight to end the curse, to save her family from the river's cold, unyielding grasp. But Elias, burdened by years of fear and guilt, warned her against rashness. "The river's depths hold horrors beyond your imagining, Ada. We must be cautious." Their words hung heavy in the air as the river whispered just beyond the window pane, the lantern's stolen glow swallowed by the encroaching night. The family stood on the precipice of a terror that threatened to drag them all beneath the surface. And somewhere in the dark water, the drowned watched, their eyes glowing with a hunger that would not be denied. The night had only just begun. The river's edge was a place of uneasy silence, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the worn wooden docks. Ada stood alone, the cool night air biting at her skin as she peered into the inky blackness where the lantern should have floated. But the lantern was gone, stolen by the unseen hands of the drowned. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild rhythm that echoed the unrest stirring beneath the surface. The gentle glow of the other lanterns seemed dimmer now, as if the river itself mourned the loss. Ada wrapped her arms around herself, the chill that gripped her deeper than the autumn breeze. She knew what this meant. The curse was no longer a distant threat, but an active force, reaching out from the depths to claim what was owed. "Why now?" she whispered to the dark water, voice barely audible. "What do you want from us?" A sudden movement caught her Arja flicker just beneath the surface, pale and spectral. She blinked, heart leaping, but the figure vanished like a disturbed shadow. The drowned were watching, waiting. Ada's fear twisted into determination. She would no longer stand by. Whatever it took, she would find a way to stop this nightmare. Back in the cramped kitchen, Elias's voice was low and urgent as he turned to Ada. "This isn't just about lanterns anymore. They're growing bolder. If we lose any more, the river will come for us." Ada met his gaze, eyes aflame with defiance. "Then we fight. We find a way to end this, Father. We can't keep living in fear." Elias's face tightened, a mixture of pride and worry shadowing his features. "I've faced this curse all my life, Ada. It's not so simple. The river's power runs deep, and the drowned are relentless. But doing nothing is worse," Ada said firmly. "We have to act, before it's too late." Their words hung between them, charged with the tension of a family torn between hope and despair. The night deepened, the hearth's glow casting flickering light over Mara's pale face. She sat quietly, candle in hand, eyes closed as if trying to will away the darkness that pressed against their home. The missing lantern's absence was a wound that ached in the silence. Elias sat beside her, his hand resting gently on hers, a silent promise of protection. But even he could not hide the fear that gnawed at his heart, the fear that the river's curse would demand a price none of them could pay. Outside, the lanterns on the hollow river bobbed and swayed, their spectral light flickering against the night. Somewhere beneath the water, the drowned waited, their hunger unquenched. The first loss had been claimed, and the river would not rest until all were taken. As the family prepared to face the coming days, the weight of the stolen lantern pressed heavily upon them. Ada's mind raced with questions and plans, but one truth was clear. The curse was no longer a distant shadow, but a looming storm they had to confront. Elias's warning echoed in her ears, but so did the river's call, a call she could no longer ignore. The fight for their souls had begun. The lanterns on the hollow river flickered, their cursed light casting long shadows over the water. And in the depths, the drowned stirred, ready to reclaim what was theirs. The night was far from over. The night wrapped itself around the hollow river like a thick, suffocating shroud as Ada and Lena stood at the water's edge. The moon was nowhere to be seen, swallowed by heavy clouds that choked the sky, leaving only the faint glow of lanterns bobbing like restless stars across the river's surface. Their light shimmered and danced, casting eerie reflections that seemed to twist and writhe with a life of their own. Ada's breath came in shallow gasps, her eyes fixed on the glowing orbs tethered to the dark water, each one a beacon for a lost soul bound by the river's ancient curse. "Are you sure we shouldn't wait until morning?" Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of water against the muddy bank. Ada shook her head, her resolve hardening. "If the lanterns are disappearing during the night, that's when we need to be here. We have to understand what's happening before it's too late." They moved cautiously along the riverbank, their footsteps muffled by the soft mud and fallen leaves. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation, mingling with a sharp tang of something metallic and old like rusted iron or dried blood. Ada's heart thudded painfully in her chest, the weight of the family's burden pressing down on her with every step. Lena shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her frame. "I don't like this, Ada. It feels like the river is watching us." Ada glanced over her shoulder, the shadows between the trees seeming to shift and pulse. Maybe it is. Their flashlights pierced the darkness in narrow beams, revealing tangled roots and discarded debris along the bank. Suddenly, Ada's light caught on something half buried in the mud, a small wooden box. Its edges rounded and softened by years of water and rot. Kneeling down, she brushed away the damp earth, revealing warped planks darkened by time. "What is it?" Lena asked, leaning in closer. Ada's fingers trembled as she pried the box open. Inside lay brittle bones wrapped in fraying, water-stained cloth, alongside rusted trinkets and old coin. A twisted ring, a shard of faded cloth embroidered with a symbol she recognized from the family's lore. Her stomach churned with revulsion and sorrow. "These are offerings," Ada whispered, her voice breaking. "From long ago, sacrifices made to keep the curse at bay." Lena swallowed hard, her bright eyes wide with shock. Why didn't anyone tell us about this? Ada closed the box carefully, a cold weight settling over her chest. Because no one wanted to remember. Because remembering means facing the truth. They pressed on, following the river's curve until they reached an ancient tree, its twisted roots clawing at the soil like skeletal fingers. Carved deep into the bark were strange symbols, worn and faded but still unmistakably deliberate. Ada traced the grooves with her fingertips, feeling a faint pulse, as if the markings were alive beneath her skin. "These are the same symbols in my ancestors' journal," she said, voice low and reverent. "They speak of the curse and the souls trapped beneath the water." Lena shivered. "It's like the river itself is alive, and it's angry." A sudden chill swept through the clearing, carrying with it mournful wails that seemed to echo from the depths below. The lanterns on the river bobbed violently, their light flickering and twisting in unnatural patterns. Shadows flickered at the edge of their vision pale, waterlogged forms that vanished when looked at directly. "We need to go," Ada said urgently, grabbing Lena's arm. "This isn't just about missing lanterns anymore. It's about the souls trapped here and the terrible price they demand." As they hurried away from the riverbank, the cold embrace of the night seemed to tighten around them, carrying the whispered secrets of the drowned and the haunting promise of sacrifice yet to come. Ada's mind raced with questions, and with the growing certainty that the family's ritual was only one thread in a much darker tapestry. The river was not done with them yet, and neither was the curse. The sun had long surrendered to the horizon when Ada and Lena finally returned to the village, their clothes damp and faces pale from the night's chilling discoveries. The weight of what they had uncovered settled heavily between them, a silence thick with unspoken fears. "We have to tell Elias," Ada said at last, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "He needs to know what's really beneath the surface." Lena nodded, though her eyes flickered with doubt. "Are you sure he'll listen?" Ada hesitated, remembering the stoic, guarded man her father was burdened by guilt, reluctant to confront the darkness he'd long tried to deny. But if the curse was growing stronger, if the river demanded more than just lanterns this year, they had no choice but to face it together. As they parted ways, Ada's gaze drifted back to the glowing river in the distance, the lanterns flickering like stars swallowed by the night. She could almost hear the whispers, again ancient voices, calling her deeper into the mystery, urging her to uncover the truth before it was too late. The river held its secrets tight, but Ada was determined to pull them into the light, no matter the cost. Inside the dim confines of Elias's small home, the flickering candlelight cast trembling shadows on the walls as Ada laid the wooden box on the worn table. Elias looked down at the remnants of the past, the bones, the trinkets, the symbols of sacrifice, and his weathered face tightened. "So, it's true," he murmured, voice heavy with resignation. "The river's hunger runs deeper than we thought." Ada met his eyes, searching for hope amidst the despair. There has to be a way to stop it, Father. We can't keep losing more of ourselves to this curse. Elias sighed, the weight of generations pressing on his shoulders. We'll find it, together. Outside, the river's surface shimmered once more, the lanterns bobbing, silently watching, waiting, their cursed light refusing to fade, and the hollow river whispered on